Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am Karen Wolfe, marriage and family therapist, and this is a webinar on the brain science behind the hand-in-hand parenting approach to children's emotions. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself and then what this webinar will entail, and we'll have some time at the end for live questions. You can put in your questions in the chat bar or save them up and speak them live. And I'll also share with you an opportunity to work together at the end. A class that I'm giving on hand-in-hand parenting. This class specifically is for therapists. I do classes for parents as well, 6-week classes. But the class that's coming up in Oakland, excuse me, I'm getting over a cough. The class that I'm giving in Oakland starting January 31st will be for therapists, but I'll share a little bit more about that at the end, and it will make more sense after we go through some of this. But whether you're listening live or listening to the recording, think through your questions that you might want to ask, and you can always email me as well at the end. So I'm Karen Wolfe, and I'm part of I've created a group practice in San Francisco and Oakland called SF Bay Play Therapy. And that picture on the top left is my therapy dog, Nandi, which he's been coming with me to most sessions. Picture on the bottom is my nephew, Aiden, a couple years ago. And at sfbayplaytherapy.com, there's lots of information about us. There's 2 other clinicians that I have as part of this practice, and there's lots of information about us and blog about parenting support and understanding kids' emotions on that website and other resources. And essentially what we do is we offer a few different services: play therapy for children and families. And play therapy is using play as the modality to help children to heal, because for kids under 12, they process things more through play than through words, because the verbal development is not fully developed until more or less until really adulthood, but adolescence is when you can start using your verbal ability to connect more deeply to emotions. And before that, we really kids need to be able to play it out. And hand-in-hand parenting is a very playful approach. So I won't be talking too much about the playful aspects today, but if you have questions about it or about play therapy, please do chime in. We also offer at sfbayplaytherapy.com parent support groups, parent support and groups, so individual support for parents drawn from hand-in-hand parenting as well as play therapy. And I do hand-in-hand parenting groups for parents. We do social skills groups. We have ones for kids between the ages of 5 and 10. We have a middle school girls group and a teen girls group as well. So you can find all of that information on the website. We also do counseling for adults and couples. More information about that is on my other website, embodiedrelationshiptherapy.com, if you want to find out more about the work that in particular I do with adults and couples using EFT and intimacy. And at sfbayplaytherapy.com, we do trainings for therapists and schools and as counseling centers as well, in play therapy and in hand-in-hand parenting. So I'll just say a little bit about hand-in-hand parenting. It's a national, actually international at this point, I believe, nonprofit, started by parents, run by parents, and they teach these 5 listening tools that help parents to feel more sane, first and foremost, and to connect to their children and their family, connect to the reason they wanted to be a parent, and get support for that. Very down-to-earth tools attachment based and trauma informed based. There's a lot of work from a lot of influence from Peter Levine's trauma work, Bowlby's attachment, as well as Winnicott. So I love hand-in-hand parenting. I came to it in 2013, I think it was, or 14, and was just blown away by how simple and profound the organization is, the tools, how down to earth the people are, the listening partnerships, which allows parents or professionals to basically do co-counseling for free with each other and get support to work through what's in the way of parenting. It's very humanistic and Rogerian as well. So I highly, highly recommend hand-in-hand parenting. It changed the way that I work with children. I'd already been working with kids for like a decade before that. And it changed the way that I support parents. And I see the transformation that happens. So I'll talk more about how, if you're a therapist, you can get involved with hand-in-hand parenting at the end, particularly through my class that's coming up. It's transformative. It was for me, and I've never experienced anything that's opened me in the way that hand-in-hand parenting has, and it's helped me with giving tools to parents and families. So that's just a little bit about me. Okay, so an overview of what I'm going to talk about today. So kids need to feel connected. Oh, there's a typo here. Kids need to feel connected to use their whole brain to think well and cooperate. So essentially, kids want to think well and cooperate already. That's naturally wired in. But in order to do that, they have to feel connected. And we'll talk more about what that means to be using their whole brain and why when they're not cooperating and not thinking well. When children feel disconnected, it affects their brain functioning and they act out. This is the reason that kids act out, not because they're manipulative or naughty, and it's because they're disconnected. Adults can help heal the disconnection and return normal brain functioning by listening and offering connection with loving limits. So we're going to talk through what all of this actually means. Okay, I'm just wondering if I can see questions as we go along. All right. So, I need to escape for a second. Sorry. Go back. Okay. So a little bit about brain functioning. So this is the triune model of the brain, based, excuse me, largely on the work of Dan Siegel in The Whole Brain Child and Parenting from the Inside Out. So if you think of the brain as having three parts, that's the triune. You can think of it as having the brain stem, which is the reptilian part of the brain. This is the part of the brain that deals with survival, autonomic nervous function, like your heart rate, your body temperature, and reflexes. It's a part of the brain that we share with reptiles. In the middle of the brain, this is evolutionary. So first was the brainstem, and growing on top of that is the limbic brain, and that's in the very center of the brain, and that is where the seat of our emotions. It's where there's a lot of talk of the amygdala, which is where fear is processed in the limbic system, and so this is where all the emotions are, and this is the mammalian brain. So this is what we share with mammals. Overlaid on top of that is the cortex, and then the thin layer over that is the neocortex. And the cortex and neocortex is where our higher order thinking is. It's a part of the brain that's unique to primates and humans. The neocortex is unique to humans, maybe dolphins, they're learning more every day. But that's the part of the brain that's unique to us, is the important part to remember. And it's a part of the brain that has executive function, in particular the frontal lobe, which is right behind your forehead. When we hear a lot about executive function, when we hear about attention deficit disorder, and what executive function is the ability to plan and sequence and filter. So the ability to filter out relevant information, both in your sensory world, so what you're seeing, what you're feeling, what you're hearing, as well as cognitively filtering out the important information to take in, and sequencing and planning. So first I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, and then this will happen. So that's planning, and then the sequence of it. And it's also on the neocortex, on the left part of the brain is where words are. There's actually an organ in the brain that processes language, and it's on the neocortex. So what does this mean for understanding our clients and understanding when a child acts out? Well, this I find is very, very helpful for parents to understand. And so please feel free to share this with any parents that you work with. Share the information, that is. That when a child's limbic system is overloaded, what that means is they're not having as much access to their higher order thinking, and which that means they're not going to be able to have as much ability to control their impulses with their executive function skills, or to use language. So the limbic system may be saying danger, 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 I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm mad, it's just a visceral emotion. But it's the ability to calmly say, I really feel like hitting that child right there, but I know that if I do that, I'm going to get in trouble. So maybe I'll take some deep breaths and calm down. The child needs their neocortex fully functioning in order to do that. When a child's limbic system is overloaded, they literally cannot access those words in a cohesive way that relates to their emotions, and the ability to control the impulses. We have this term called flipping your lid, and it's like the neocortex is the lid, and it's been flipped. So if you put your hand into a fist right now, where you have the thumb in the middle of your palm, and then you wrap your fingers on top of it, that can be a model for the brain. So in that case, your wrist is the brain stem, the thumb in the middle is your limbic system, and the fingers on top are your neocortex. When if you move your thumb around, like the limbic system is starting to get overloaded, and then flip up your fingers, your lid has been flipped. And so the child's limbic system is kind of raw and exposed. It's where all of the attention and blood and awareness is going. And the ability to think through behaviors and use coping mechanisms and tools like anger management strategies they're not able to. And so in order to allow a child to be able to come back to have their cortex, rested and connected, that lid back down and not flipped, the limbic system first has to settle down enough. So I find this a very, very important point for parents to understand, and teachers to understand, is that we can teach coping mechanisms, but a child is not going to be able to use them if their limbic system's overwhelmed. Now, if there's any trauma involved, then they're more likely to flip their lid, because the brain, it starts at the bottom up. So the brain stem is their focusing on survival, and if there's trauma, the brainstem may be compromised and more likely to heat the body up and send signals of not being safe, which sends signals to the limbic system of not being safe, which then, you don't have to think through things. If you're not safe, back when we were evolving into humans, if there was a lion in the bush, if you think through, was that a lion? I'm not sure. It sounded like it could be, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe, okay, well, where should I go? Should I go left or should I go right? If you're thinking through things in that way, you'd be dead. So our ancestors that did think through things in that way, they're gone. We are not evolved from them. We're evolved from the ones who saw the lion and said, run, and did not stay connected to the neocortex. That's what saved us. So, so the limbic system, is going to take over in those moments. And of course, we're not going to be able to use coping mechanisms. So there's an important piece in this, which is that there's no such thing as an individual human brain. The limbic system is always paying attention to and tuning into those around you, in particular children. So the limbic system is fully developed at birth, some say before. So that means kids can feel all despair and joy and rage, from birth or before, but the ability to process it and understand it is not fully formed until adulthood. So what that limbic system does is it scans for safety. It's kids are constantly scanning to feel if the adults and the environment around them is safe. So the human brain is not really, it's not, you can't think of it as separate. We're constant when we're around other people, we're constantly tuning in to what they're feeling, even if we're not aware of it. Our brains are doing that. And so a kid's limbic system is constantly scanning to see, hey, are people paying attention to me? Am I safe? That's what they're constantly doing. And if there's any sort of trauma that would cause them to be more prone to feeling unsafe or to interpreting even neutral information as dangerous, then they're more likely to, their brain is more likely to signal danger if a parent or a caregiver is not able to pay attention when they're feeling a little bit distressed, because of this limbic connectedness, because the limbic system is constantly scanning to see, am I safe? Am I connected? Are there people around that can help me? So when no one is available, if a child is feeling unsafe in some way, and it could be as simple as they're sitting, thinking of maybe a preschooler sitting at their table and doing art, and they can't figure out how to use the glue. And they look around and there's no adult paying attention. So if this child is already full of emotions, this, for whatever reason, whether it's a history of trauma or neurodiversity that causes them to be more sensitive, or simply a difficult day at school or at home, if there's something that's going to trigger them, or maybe there was a moment where they really needed someone and they weren't there, and so the associations trigger that, then they're looking around, there's no adult to help. Now it's not a dangerous situation, but their limbic system could signal danger. Now, and it could be a small signal, that they can recover from pretty quickly, or it could be a big signal where they either shut down and withdraw, look away, go inside of themselves, dissociate a little bit, until maybe a teacher notices, or have a tantrum. A kid is maybe next to them, bumps them, and they freak out, or they hit them, or they fall to the ground because, and then it looks like they're the problem child, but really what was happening is their limbic system was signaling threat and danger because an adult was not able to pay attention in that moment, because that's how we evolved. That's normal, and it's healthy, and it's normal and healthy for kids to be tuned into whether adults are paying attention. Now, we'll talk about, what to do when it's, essentially maladaptive. If child's brain is signaling danger and threat at the smallest thing all of the time, obviously there's something that that needs to happen in order to help that. And I'll talk through what we can do. But I first want to just lay the groundwork for this philosophy to understand why a child might act out. And we talk about that as limbic hijack. It's like their limbic system has completely hijacked their brain. Parents and therapists will say, oh, they were unreasonable. I couldn't talk through it with them. Well, because they're literally not in the reasoning part of their brain. It's flipped. Their limbic system has hijacked the entire brain. And the limbic system's only job is to find emotional safety. So when a child's limbic system is hijacked, then they're not able to cooperate and behave. Now, the other thing is, because there's no such thing as an individual human brain, that is true also for us as adults, that we get impacted by children. So if your child is in limbic hijack, you will start to feel that. And especially new clinicians, I find this all of the time, that our own trauma, big T or little t trauma, gets re-stimulated when a child is going into limbic hijack. So a child has some unreasonable behavior. That's what it looks like on the outside. On the inside, their limbic system is sending an alarm. So our nervous system starts to feel what they're feeling and are not able to digest. So threat/limbic hijack is when our nervous system cannot process the emotions that are happening. It goes into overwhelm, and so we flip our lids. So a child's going into limbic hijack, and we limbically resonate with them, our heart rate starts to race. So our limbic system starts to signal danger, which goes down to our brainstem and says, oh man, like, we're in danger. We need to do what we need to do to survive. Your mind starts racing. You might find your stomach clenches, and you might just start to feel panic. So then if we then flip our lids too, if you were to put your hands and fists, both your hands in those fists with a thumb in the middle, and then flip up your fingers so that both of the neocortexes are flipped. And it's like the adult and the child are both exposed limbic systems. And, if you put your hands together like you were clapping, but your thumbs are the ones that are touching, what happens? Just your limbic systems are hitting each other. No one's reasonable. And this is what happens when adults get into power struggles with kids. It's because we are limbically hijacked. And we don't often know when we are, because it doesn't show up in the same way as with kids. Sometimes it does, but oftentimes we're not, yelling and screaming. We just feel irritated and self-righteous. And what's actually happening is we are not regulated in the sense of not pushing our emotions down, but able to hold our emotions that are happening and digest them in a calm way. We're just limbically hijacked. So we need to look at what to do when that happens as well. So let me see what I have as my next slide. So how do we heal that limbic overload? So if you find that you have a child that's constantly going into limbic hijack, they're acting out in class or hitting other kids or running away from their parents at home, or the parents that you work with are in limbic hijack, where this shows up as clinicians as us feeling very irritated with our clients, feeling like I don't want to play that game one more time, feeling unsafe with them, feeling angry at them. And you see this with parents all the time as well. And there's lots of other reasons that both us as clinicians and parents get limbically hijacked, the situations that we have to deal with in life. It's like parenting and working with kids. It does not happen in a vacuum. In particular, parenting is a very isolating experience in our society. So many parents feel like they're alone, even when they have others around them, because there's this feeling like there's just so much pressure on parents to have to do it right. And there's no right. There's a million different books and methods, and there's a lot of judgment from other parents, as well as from parents inside of themselves, judging themselves. So there's no support for parents. And so parents are more likely to become limbically overloaded, and it's not their fault. They just need support. So if we remember that kids are good, kids are evolved to want to behave and well and to cooperate and to love, that this is our natural way of being. We as human beings, it's not survival of the fittest, it's survival of the most cooperative. We as human beings want to love. When we can't, it's because there's something in our way. And this is true for children, and this is true for parents. There's no such thing as a bad kid. There's no such thing as a bad parent. It's just there's something in their way. And this is a very important piece, especially for clinicians who don't have children, to help with the compassion for parents. It's easy for clinicians to judge parents. You go to the park and you see a parent on their phone and thinking, oh my gosh, all of these parents are so checked out. Well, they don't have any time to themselves. They're totally overwhelmed by parenting. And then they come into your office and they need to feel like it's okay for them to be overwhelmed and to release that. So how in hand-in-hand parenting, the understanding, which this comes a lot from Peter Levine's work around trauma, how we heal that limbic overload is through these release processes that happen in the body. So if you take a look at this slide, here I have 6. So tears is one of the ways that the limbic system releases. These are all ways we want to think about how do you release that stuck limbic system so that the neocortex can come back online. So tears have the stress hormone cortisol in them. So when we cry tears of sadness, we're actually washing our body clear of the stress that we've been holding. Now, I'm going to take a side note. All of these things are releases. However, we need another limbic system that's holding us in love and compassion in order for it to be a healing moment. Otherwise, there may be some catharsis and you may feel a little better afterwards, or it may just be neutral at best. But crying for a child to go cry in their room alone is not what's healing. It may be that it's not damaging because the parents are overwhelmed and they need a break from the crying, and so no one's hurting each other if the child's crying in their room alone. But in order for the limbic system to be healed, we need another limbic system that is shining, that's resonating compassion and attention and non-judgment. So this is true for us as clinicians as well. So if you're laying in your bed at night crying, you might feel a little more released the next day. But if you're on the couch with your own therapist, or on the phone with a friend and crying, and you feel their love and attention, something different happens in your brain then. So the limbic system is healed by these release mechanisms happening in relationship. So back to what those release mechanisms are of the body, that the natural processes that our bodies are endowed with to heal ourselves. Tears is one. So crying is good. Crying is healing. Tantrums. So in tantrum is, we think of that as righteous indignation, not self-righteous, but righteous indignation. Like, no, this is not okay. I will not stand for this. Your body heats up when that happens. That's part of the next piece, the perspiration, which releases the stuck places in the brainstem. But we want to think about tantrums, like the content of a child's tantrums may make no sense to us. And then, of course, they happen at very inconvenient times when we're already stressed out and limbically overloaded, or we get sort of thrown by it where it's unexpected. And so then we go into limbic hijack as clinicians. But a tantrum is a healthy process. MLK Day is coming up, and I know he was nonviolent, but that sense of this needs to change, that is a healthy tantrum. Now it's going to come out different with kids because they're not using their neocortex, but also we as adults need times where we can have a big fat tantrum on purpose, consciously, while with a listening partner listening to us about how things, letting yourself be illogical, how something feels unfair, or like, I don't want to play this game with this child again. I'm tired of getting hit in the head with these fake snowballs. That's a tantrum that I had to have a couple times when I was doing a social skills group with 4 6-year-old boys, and I do a lot of rough house play, and I have these little sort of polyester snowballs, and they loved throwing them at me, which is great. It's important for them to feel powerful, and there was group cohesion and laughter, but I was just over it. and I would go into those sessions for a little while thinking, oh my God, if they hit me in the head one more freaking time, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I had to, have a listening partner, excuse me, which is a hand-in-hand parenting tool, who I had a tantrum with, and she listened and she got me to laugh about it. And then my mind was more freed up in order to be present for what the kids wanted to play and to follow their lead. So, so tantrums is a way that the limbic system heals when there's another person holding loving space with them. Perspiration, laughter is also a way that the limbic system releases emotion. They found this in some other trauma work as well, that laughter, it does something around, I don't know the specifics, but there's something around it. It unsticks the way that the trauma memories get stuck in the hippocampus, and they just keep repeating, and it helps them encode. Laughter sort of opens something up and helps it encode, like integrate into long-term memory in a more integrated way in the whole brain. So laughter is a very good way to help release the difficult stress. I had a little girl in my office just today who's been experiencing a ton of anxiety and at school. And so, what did we do? I let her pick up little fuzz balls on the carpet and pretended to be afraid of her. And for about 45 minutes, we played versions of that game, and where she giggled and giggled and giggled and, left looking so much brighter and so much more confident and able to take on the world. So laughter is a really wonderful way for children and adults to heal the limbic system. When parents are able to laugh about the ridiculous challenges of parenting, laugh along with them. Let that know that that's actually healthy and healing. And we need to not just laugh. Patty Whiffler, the founder of Hand in Hand Parenting, has said that kids need to laugh and cry about difficult experiences in their life. And I found that to be true in my experiences, with kids as well as adults. But when the laughter happens, go with it. It's the natural healing process that we have. So shaking or trembling is also a way that the limbic system heals, in particular, deep fear. So if a child is crying so much that their jaw is shivering, or their the arms are quivering a little bit, that's actually the body releasing deep fear from the limbic system. And when you just allow it and are, shower your warmth and your presence, then it allows the healing process to happen. Yawning and stretching is also a way that the limbic system kind of comes back to equilibrium. So I want you to just think about when you see these processes in children, and when parents come to your office and talk about their kids crying and tantruming, to think through, okay, or that they're trying to get their parents to laugh and to play in certain ways so that they can laugh, and maybe the parents are picking up on it. I want you to think about these processes as a way that the body the body is attempting to release these stuck places, and that when a parent is sitting in your office, and if they go into righteous indignation, to make a space for that, to let them offload that limbic stuckness, and notice, are they starting to perspire, are they starting to shake, are they going to laughter or tears, and keep doing what you're doing that evokes those releases. Okay, let's see what's next. So how adults can help children to get to that limbic release when they are limbically overloaded. Limits is the first way. So kids need loving limits to move through stuck feelings. When a child is acting uncooperative in hand-in-hand parenting, we talk about it as off-track behavior. It's like they're not in the track of their neocortex, and so we hold a limit. I can't let you hit your sister, or I can't let you push the blocks over, and you do that with love. And when you do that with love and attention, then what happens is the yucky feelings that are stuck inside of them rise to the surface. And this is where you get a child who wants to tantrum, or wants to spit in your face, or starts breaking down and crying. And that is their body starting to release as you offer your warmth and your limit to stop the unreasonable behavior. When you listen to a child's tantrum, it helps both the crier and the listener's nervous system come back to equilibrium. There's nothing that you need to do. Just hold, if you can get close to the child, like the woman is in this picture, having some gentle body contact, a hand on the back, your eye contact, where you're offering your eye contact, and just breathing, it actually allows your nervous system also to come back to equilibrium, because remember, you're limbically resonating with what's happening inside of that child as well. And if you have any unresolved experiences from your childhood, which most of us do, especially for therapists, in particular, where your difficult feelings were not listened to, those may also get re-stimulated in various ways, where maybe you might start to get overwhelmed, or sometimes what happens is this feeling of like, I never got this, so how can there's like this, like, oh, they want too much from me. That could sometimes come up from us because we're sort of allying with what our perception of our parents was when we were a child, that if they weren't able to give that to us. So, that's a chance for those traumas in us also to heal as we let them come to the surface, and we feel our body heating up, and we feel ourselves starting to get nervous, and we bring some mindful attention to those feelings in our body, and we take deep breaths, and you just make eye contact with the child. They may not be looking back at you, because that's may make them feel, that's going to make them feel their feelings more. And the child limbic system is feeling overwhelmed. So our job is just to offer that warmth and that connection, offer that eye contact, offer that gentle hand, that deep breathing. And it actually will allow both of if you let the whole arc happen, if you breathe through the difficulties and you keep it safe, then the brain and the nervous system of both of you will come naturally back to equilibrium. And sometimes it can take a while, and it certainly takes a great amount of trust. I had a child in my office once who, he was 7 years old, and he had been having difficulties at school, not participating in the classroom, and had been having a lot of anxieties. And so I mostly had done non-directive play with him, but I wanted to do a little directive play. So my limit that I brought that day was that we're going to play this game. We're going to play this game where we write down our worries on a piece of paper, and then we build a Jenga tower, and then we crumple the worries up and throw them inside the Jenga tower. And that was the limit that I had brought that day, that we were going to do that for part of the time. Well, he started to refuse at first, saying, no, I'm not going to do that. You can't make me. Now, if I had tried to negotiate with him, then I'm thinking that he's in his neocortex, which was not what was happening, and it would have gotten us into a power struggle. So didn't try to reason with him. I understood, oh, okay, there's some stuck feelings here that are happening. So I continued to bring the limit, but also to bring my warmth and listening. And so I said, I know you don't want to do this, and this is what we have to do today. And he'd say, no, I'm not going to. You can't make me. And I would, same thing. So I would let the impact of his negative emotion hit me in my soma, in my body. I would feel the impact of it. I'd feel a rush of adrenaline. That's what happens. I might feel a moment of wanting to go into a habit of, no, this is what we have to do, or if I don't do this, I'm not a good therapist, all those things that run through your mind. But I let that hit me. I breathe through that, and I simply bring my compassion and the limit. And take a deep breath, and I know, you really don't want to do this. So I'd be reflecting his feeling. I'd add a little more strength to match that with him. I know you really don't want to do this. And then with compassion, this is what we have to do today. And so we did that for about maybe a half hour. And he was ramping up till he got to the point where he was stomping his foot on the floor, and tears were starting to stream down his face. And he was even saying, I'm going to call my mom. And I'm going to tell her that I never want to come back here. Now, if I had let that hit my limbic system and flip me, because maybe I'm getting scared, oh my gosh, I don't want to lose this client. Am I doing the right thing? Is she going to judge me? Then I would not have been in a space to hold his emotion. But I instead trusted the process, which is, I think trust is like an act of faith a lot of times. Like, maybe I didn't feel trust in that moment, but I actually do believe in this process. And so I'm going to make a choice to trust this and to trust myself. And if I mess up, I also trust that I can repair that. So let me go ahead and take a stand for trusting myself and trusting where I'm coming from. So he was saying, oh, I'm going to call my mom. And I just breathed through that, felt what he was feeling, and reflected back. Yeah, I know you don't want to come back here. And then I offered him some compassion in the form of saying, yes, we can call your mom, because I could tell he needed some more. He needed connection to his attachment figure at that moment. His mind was going into more panic. So I let him call her, and she listened to him, and they got off the phone, and then he was crying still. And then because we had both gone through this and our limbic systems had been processing these difficult emotions together, the content of what his emotion brought up in my mind was different than the content of his mind, because it brought up content around, am I doing the right thing? Am I a good therapist? What's the mom going to think? All of these things. But because we had breathed through that together, and I had worked to bring compassion to what was happening in my body as well as what was happening in his body, and continuing to hold the limit, then I was able to say to him, I wonder what's hard about this. He wasn't able to do that before. That would have been too cognitive of a question for me to ask of him before. But because we had worked through some of the upset, he was able to, in a very grief-stricken way, so in a different energy, he was no longer righteously tantruming, grief-stricken way, say that, I said, I don't like writing. And I said, oh, because I understood at that point that he had some learning differences, and the actual like holding of the pencil, he had judgment about himself, about how he did it, and it felt hard and scary. And so when he was able to get to that deeper grief, the deeper vulnerable feeling of like, I'm not good enough because I can't hold my pencil, all through the emotion, because all he said was, I don't like writing. From that point, I was able to feel that along with him and compassionately collaborate to come to another agreement. I said, well, we don't have to do it with writing. We can do it with another way. And then we were able to collaborate and find a way to still do that worry activity, but not do it with something that was triggering him. But it was important to allow, it wasn't about the solving of the problem was not to solve like how to get to doing that activity. It was giving him space to work through that very, very difficult, scary emotion of I'm different. Because at school, he would just refuse. I'm just not going to do that. And I continued to hold the limit, but also offered my compassion. So he was able to also see, hey, another person can be with me even when I reject them, even when I say, I hate you, I'm going to call my mom, I'm never coming back here, that someone can take that, someone can hold that and still love me. And that builds trust and rapport, that builds healthy attachment, both with you as a therapist or caregiver. And this is, in hand-in-hand parenting, we teach to parents as well, although it takes a while to get there because it's just complex. But it allows him to then have that experience later on in his life that I am lovable even when I'm having these big, big, huge feelings. So when we listen to a kid's tantrum, it can bring both of our nervous systems back to equilibrium, but we have to be willing to go through that process. And trauma is healed by loving acceptance of the difficult emotion being added to the experience of that emotion. So, the difficult emotion, and you're having the difficult feeling, the child's having the difficult feeling, you're having a difficult feeling, and then you add some loving acceptance to that. First, you have to add loving acceptance to your difficult feeling. Oh, I'm frustrated. Oh, I'm scared. And then you can add, that's probably what the child's feeling. Oftentimes with kids, especially under 12, we're feeling what they're feeling. Although I would say it's true with teenagers too. It's just a lot more complicated. But when we add to loving acceptance to what we're feeling and then what they're feeling, that's what helps to heal that stuck emotion. So how do we think about kids' behavior? This is what we've been talking about, that all kids are good, even when they're full of feelings and aren't able to follow directions or play well with others. That actually kids are good. This little girl who's standing in the corner sticking her tongue out, she's just limbically hijacked at that moment. She's not a little brat. It's like these things come through you have to watch the uncensored thoughts that come through your mind. And it's okay. And that's good to bring out in listening partnerships to let your raw limbic system just release, but with awareness that you're doing that to get to something that's stuck underneath. You have to be aware of what comes up, because that's also what's going to come up with parents. And to allow that and to be accepting of that. Oh, okay, there's like some judgment that I have, some irritation that I have about if this child was in my office. I might have to work through some of those feelings, but can I understand the concept that even though it's difficult to be with her and be with these feelings, that underneath, actually, there's just something in her way. There's some emotion that's stuck in her way. So so the idea of the cycle that happens, I like to think of in terms of the human condition, which is a Buddhist term. The human condition is basically suffering exists. We suffer. And I think that's relevant because the concept of Buddhism is that first you have to accept that there is suffering. that there's pain, and then there's our response to it, which is suffering, and that there is a way out, but that suffering is always going to be there. And so how it shows up with kids is, if we start at the top here, there's some disconnection. So the parent turns away or teacher turns away at a moment where they are wanting or needing something, and they feel they feel, well, like what, in emotionally focused therapy, what Susan Johnson would say is they might feel like an attachment injury, that they're having this attachment need or longing. I need you. And they don't get it. They feel dropped. And so there's this relationship panic that happens inside. In hand-in-hand parenting, we talk about that as disconnection. And that leads to broken thinking. Now, this is a very important and helpful analogy of what happens. So what we see on the surface are these difficult behaviors and feelings. Kids grabbing, not cooperating in class, pushing other kids, saying mean things, sitting in the corner, being anxious or dissociated, bullying. So what we see are these difficult feelings and behaviors, but what's going on underneath is that their thinking is broken. So this is another way to think of the limbic hijack. And here's the analogy. If you say you're wanting to do something, a parent is wanting to do something with their child. They're wanting to get their kid out the door, and they won't put their shoes on, and it turns into a big tantrum. Okay, so there's the difficult behavior right there. Now, if we think of it in terms of broken thinking, an analogy would be that you are on your way to a meeting, and you have to go up these stairs in order to get to the meeting, and you're already late, and you're feeling anxious and stressed about that. And the stairs are very narrow, but the person in front of you is walking incredibly slow. Now, if you look at their behavior and you think, oh my God, they're so selfish, what a jerk, they're in my way, maybe you would quietly walk behind them, but stew and get yourself more worked up. Maybe you'd push by them and brush by them, quickly and kind of rudely, or excuse me, can you move please? Or, you might react to them in that way. But if that person in front of you actually was walking slow because their ankle was broken and you couldn't see it because they were maybe in a boot or it was in the process of healing, but once you knew that their ankle was broken, the way that you react to them would be different. You might still be a little stressed out that you were going to be late to your meeting, but you might respond to that stress by accepting that you're going to be late and adding loving acceptance to the feeling of judgment of yourself of being late or stress. Or you might a little bit more gently ask to move around them, or you might offer them help. If this was someone you cared about in particular, maybe this is a close coworker, you might look at them and say, hey, is everything okay? Can I carry a bag for you? Because they're not doing it to be a jerk or to be manipulative or just to get your goat. They're doing it because something is broken. Now, if we take that back to the analogy with the kids, same thing. They're not putting their shoes on in order just to slow you down one more time because they're the most ungrateful kids in the world, which is how it feels. And it's okay that it feels that way. But they're doing it because their thinking is broken. Now, your thinking might be broken in that moment too, in which case you need some help. Maybe you need a timeout to go, sit down, or maybe you just need to get through what you're doing and get out the door and get to the next thing. But if your thinking is broken, that's another issue to deal with, which, then, you look at how do parents get limbic release? How do they get support for the difficult job of parenting so that their thinking is broken less often, especially in the face of their child's broken thinking? But if the parent looks at the child and says, oh, they're not putting on their shoes because their thinking is broken, then what's going to happen is they have a different response. The response would be a more one of, how do I heal this broken thinking? How do I heal that? And it is literally the neocortex is like not, you know, connected, so to speak. It's not online as much in that moment. So the thinking cap is like broken in that minute. So if they look at their child and say, oh, their thinking is broken, how can I help? You know, well, if you understand that disconnection is the underlying cause, then you would go and you would add connection, warmth, and safety. Maybe they would kneel down, look the child in the eye and say, honey, do you need some help? Now, what happens next if broken thinking leads to connection, warmth, and safety from an adult, what actually happens next is the healing process. Now, if it's a small disconnection, the healing process may simply be expression of a vulnerable emotion. Yes, can you help me with my shoes? Or I'm worried about school today. But more often than not, the healing process is, if we remember going back to the slide with the tears and the shaking and the tantrums and the perspiration, that's the healing process. So the parent might come up to the child and offer that warmth and connection. Honey, what's going on? Do you need help? And then what's going to happen? Probably some sort of righteous indignation. No, I can do it myself, right? But if we understand that is part of the healing process, and we continue to add connection, warmth, and safety. Obviously, we can't let a child actually hurt us or hurt someone else or hurt the environment, because that hurts them actually. So we'd hold, I can't let you throw your shoe. Can't let you throw your shoe, honey. And maybe we turn it into a game, which will lead them to some laughter, or we, just hold the limit and warmth, and they get to tears. That's the healing process. So adding connection, this is a very important piece in hand-in-hand parenting. Adding connection, it doesn't just cause good manners and good behavior. It causes healing the disconnection that caused those difficult behaviors in the first place. Once we hold space for healing those tears and tantrums, then the child's limbic system can release, and we can go back to collaborative problem solving, thinking well. What happens next? More disconnection. That's just the human condition. Cannot get away from disconnection. So what does that healing process look like? I'll give there's lots of different ways it can happen. I'll give a very, short, successful example, because we're not always able to do this process to its full extent because of time. But one example was a child. So starting with a disconnection. So I have a child who didn't want to leave my office. He wanted one more sticker, and then he wanted a piece of gum, and then he wanted another sticker. And at first I thought, oh, no big deal, sticker. Oh, no big deal, piece of gum. Transitional object. And then it dawned on me that what was happening was actually he was having some broken thinking, and he was calling for a limit. When kids need to release, they will call for a limit. So I had a million stickers. I could have given him the whole pack. But what I realized was there was some disconnection that was underneath there that needed to come out. So I held the limit and said, I'm sorry, I can't give you another sticker. And he tried to cajole a little bit more, and I just added connection, warmth, and safety. I kneeled a little bit closer to him. I looked into his eyes. I added warmth, and I just empathized. I know it's hard to leave. It's hard to leave, so I kind of made a guess at what was happening, which is not really what you do in hand-in-hand parenting. That's more from my play therapy background. But, you could say, you want another sticker. I can't give you one. And then what happened was the healing process. For him, it was very simple and short. He just had one little tear roll down his cheek, and I just sat there with it for a moment, breathing through my own anxiety of oh my gosh, what's this going to turn into? We're at the end of our session. Are we going to have time to, am I going to be late for my next client? Just breathing through that and putting my attention on him. When we trust, I find that oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes the time anxiety that we feel, it just it becomes irrelevant. It actually, we're not late. We don't end up being late when we make space in this conscious way, more often than not. And he just had one little tear, and then he was able to get up and like cheerfully say, okay, see you next week. So that's a very simple example of how, a simple and easy and successful example of how understanding that his thinking was broken, adding some connection leads to the healing process, leads to collaborative problem solving. Now, what happens when we add frustration to the broken thinking? So the child is having a difficult moment, won't get out the door. You feel frustrated. Maybe the parent might even punish or banish. Okay, no iPad, or go to your room. When you add that, what happens next is isolation. So the child feels isolated in their feeling. They have more fear. They have more shame, which leads to avoiding the feeling or more acting out. So if there was avoiding, they'd hide and repress, or if there was acting out, there'd be more difficult behaviors. So when we add frustration, it will just add fuel to the fire, even if it's not in that moment. It may be they tamp it down out of fear and shame. They have some isolation, so they tamp the feeling down, but it will come out more strongly later on. So we can't save children from all disconnection. It happens. Disconnection happens. It's very, very important for parents to hear this, because there is so much pressure to feel like to be a good parent and to be a safe haven and to, hold, have our children, be healthy and well-adjusted, that we think that we can save them from disconnection, and we just can't. It's part of the human condition that disconnection will happen, and disconnection because of something that you as a parent do will happen. And there's a certain grief, but also solace that I see that parents get from that, because yes, we want to change the cycle in the sense that we want to add warmth and connection when our behavior stimulates difficult feelings in our children, and that it's also not always from parents. The children come in with all sorts of their own challenges and challenges in school as well. But we actually can't save them from disconnection. All we can do is offer listening, and that's enough. That is enough. So the connection piece here are the 5 listening tools in hand-in-hand parenting. So I see that we are at an hour. I'm going to go for, I think, just 10 more minutes, and hopefully get some questions here at the end too. So I'm going to rush a little bit through some of the rest of this. So actually, I want to go back here for a second. So the listening tools that we add when a child has broken thinking in hand-in-hand parenting, we talk about 5 listening tools. So one of and this is what you would learn in depth in my class. So what we do is we actually practice all of the tools in person. It's highly, highly, highly experiential class. All of hand-in-hand parenting's classes are. You do it yourself, and you do the tools with your own children if you have them, or with your clients. So I'll just briefly go through what those 5 listening tools are, because I think that is important. So the first listening tool is called listening partnerships, and that is where 2 parents, or could also be 2 people who work with children, or one that works with children and one that's a parent, get together on the phone or in person, and you share listening time. And what that means is you set a specific amount of time. One person goes first, and they just let themselves offload all of the difficulties around parenting or working with and loving children, letting yourself laugh about the ridiculousness, letting yourself rage about how hard it is. You know, we'd stomp the ground, hit a pillow, you know, pretend that, like, you know, I just want to choke this child, and letting yourself laugh it out. So you really like let yourself just take the top off of all of the things that you censor, with the understanding that you're doing that to release these big stuck feelings. And once you do that, then the listener just listens non-judgmentally with open awareness and acceptance. They may offer you, like, if it's in person, like their hands to push on if you're feeling angry. They might say things that, like, I had a listening partner with the snowball listening partnership I did, where she said, "Oh, I'm going to throw a snowball at you." And that got me to laugh and got me to be able to say, "No, I can't take one more." And then, you know, she would say things that would draw out the feeling that I was experiencing. And this is a simple, but in some ways complex tool that takes a while to learn, and to learn how to let your own limbic system feel the trust and safety with another person to let all of that big stuckness out. So we do that in the class. You do that as a group, as a whole group. Each person gets listening time where we get to really go for it, go for those big stuck feelings, get loud, sob about difficult emotions, just be listened to. If you want to think through a problem, have that too. It's like there's a deep, deep trust that as a parent or as a clinician, you have the truth inside of you. You have it inside of you. And there is just so much truth in that, but you only learn that through doing it. So that's the first listening tools, listening partnerships. And that is number one, because that really connects parents with each other, and it reduces that isolation that parents feel. So that's something that we would learn in the hand-in-hand parenting class for therapists coming up. The next tool would be special time. And special time is where you set aside a specific amount of time to just follow your child's lead. This is akin to non-directive play therapy. And what this does is it warms up the connection with the child, and it allows the parent to attune to them. So we would learn about doing special time, and we would start to do it. Those of you who work with children, you would start to do it. And I did find I'd already been doing play therapy for years, but when I switched it into special time, I would set a timer in the office, because sometimes I'd want to do something directive, like the last 15 minutes. There's something about when you set that timer, it's like 30 minutes of special time. It's now out of your control. You're not going to change it just because you feel done, or because it feels like there's something else that needs to be done. That is that child's time, and they get to literally do anything that they want. And we do a little adult to adult special time, where even just 5 minutes, if you can do whatever you want, and this other adult pours their attention on you, is very, very healing, very profound, to know that you don't have to do anything to get another person's devoted attention, that you're enough, that they want to pour their delight on you. And this is what we practice with the children as well. So that's special time. And stay listening. Stay listening is in a lot of ways what we've been talking about today. Stay listening is one of the key listening tools. They're all very important. If you miss one of them, it's like a stool with one leg missing. It's wobbly. You need all of the tools to have a balanced approach. But stay listening is the crux of hand-in-hand parenting. And in stay listening, this is what we've been talking about today. When a child is having off-track behavior, they're limbically hijacked, they got broken thinking, difficult feelings, and you hold space and you listen with warmth and attention. And that allows them to heal their limbic system, as well as for you to heal yours. The fourth tool is play listening. And play listening is a wonderful tool. It's a lot of fun. It's also a really good way to work through our difficult feelings about working with parents, a lot of therapists experience, where you actually flip the roles, and it's a role reversal. So in play listening with a child, the child is the one who's big and in charge and in control and faster than you, and they throw their little snowball and it knocks you over, and they put on their lion mask and, oh my God, you're so scared, and they try to they push on your hands and you just fall to the ground because they're so strong, and that elicits their laughter, their strength. They get to feel in control. They get to feel powerful. And it's a way to actually work on specific issues too. Like if a child is having separation anxiety, you can use play listening by pleading with them not to go. Please don't go. Please, please, please. No, I'll just die. Oh, please. And that's them getting to think about and address the issue, which is the separation. But they get to feel like they're the one in control and in power through the play and through ordering you. Well, nope, sorry, I've got to go. Sorry, nope, you've got to be alone. And then you exaggeratedly grieve them leaving. Oh no, I'm going to be so sad. And, kids just, it fills them up. It fills their cup up when we do this kind of play. And it's kind of easy to say, but a little bit harder to do. So we get to practice it in the class with each other. We'll, wad up pieces of paper and have little snowball fights, and also get to practice it with your clients and talk about how it's different. I've seen when I use this tool instead of more like behavior modification tools, how much the child's behavior will shift. For example, I had a child who was constantly stepping on other kids' toes at school and then denying it, like right. The teacher would see it happen, and then the little girl would say, I didn't do it. And so we would play these competitive games that she instigated in our special time, where like we would play baseball, and I wouldn't win, of course. I would never be allowed to win, even if I got a point. And at first, I would try and employ a tool where I thought I was teaching her empathy by saying, oh, I feel sad when you don't let me have a point because I actually did get a point. Or I'd say, nope, I actually did win there. And that did not add any warmth to our connection. It did not add any rapport. It did not change her behavior. It just made me feel like I was teaching her something moral. And so when I changed it to play listening, where I would pretend to run as fast as I can and I'll like fall on the ground at the last second, when she would say, nope, you didn't get a point, just, oh man, okay, maybe I'll do 20 push-ups. And I would do 20 push-ups, and now I'm going to meditate. Oh, okay, now I'm going to win for sure. And she loved that. And we played that game where I was losing terribly for sessions and sessions and sessions. And then at some point, she started to give me a point. And then the next session, I got 3 points. And then the next session, it was tied. And then the next session, she wanted to play a cooperative game. She had moved on because she had gotten to work through her feelings of not being in control and not being powerful. And that's why she was stepping on kids' hands, not because she didn't have empathy, but because she was not feeling powerful. And once we started playing that game 45 minutes a week, it's like it doesn't take that much time, then she, within a couple of months, her behavior changed. So that's play listening. And then the last tool is around setting limits, which we talked a little bit about today, where we do listen, limit, listen, where you set the limit, you listen to the feelings, and then you set the limit again in order to get the healing. So I'm going to go through this just to the last slide, because we did talk through all of this, and you'll get you'll get the recording. So if you're interested in the hand-in-hand parenting for therapists class, where you'll learn all these 5 tools, it starts January 31st in Oakland, in Montclair. It's a 2.5-hour class. So there's plenty of time to really drop in and learn these tools. And you can find more information on sfbayplaytherapy.com. If you click the link that says training for therapists. So I want to make space here now for questions. I'm going to see what's already here, and then let's see. Someone said, what did you say the perspiration was good for or caused by? So perspiration is a healing of anger. So deep-seated anger, when we get in touch with it, the perspiration allows our limbic system to heal times that we have felt like oppressed. So anger is when we have felt that something has not been just in our lives. And so anger is a way to be righteously indignant and say, this is not just, I take a stand for this. And then perspiration allows that to heal. So a lot of times I see when we do listening partnerships in my office with parents or with therapists, people, start to get hot. Oh gosh, I'm heating up. They're releasing anger, but oftentimes it's just releasing other emotion as well. So that's a good question. Okay, so let's see. If there's any other questions, you can raise your hand or just type them in. And a lot of times people have questions about how to apply this in school with teachers, and it can be challenging because a teacher has a different job than we as therapists do, and we have to really honor and respect that. But a good place to start is just offer them listening. And you don't even have to tell them you're offering them listening, but just know in your mind that they're dealing with a lot. They've got so many kids, a lot of pressure. If it's a public school, they're often overworked and underpaid. And so know that they need to offload their emotions too, and allow them a chance to laugh about how irritated they are at a kid. Let them actually, if they are venting about a kid, what you can do, is you can get out a pillow and say, let's pretend this is Johnny, and I'm gonna just hit him right here and just pound on the pillow. Oh, you need to do your work. And they'll probably look at you like, excuse me, like you're crazy. But it will help them. It'll either invite them to do it with you, and it will at least allow them that as an option, that they can release that. Or they might start laughing, which then their limbic system is releasing. So offering your listening, and then oftentimes a tool beyond that I find that teachers are able to use readily is special time. I've seen so often when a child is acting out, if they just get 5 minutes of special time with that teacher once or twice a week, where they just stay in for 5 extra minutes, at lunchtime, and the teacher says, okay, we can do whatever you want. And the teacher just has their full attention on them. It's kind of remarkable how children's behavior will change pretty quickly. So special time is a really good one to teach them. There's also, I have a bunch of articles on my website, sfbayplaytherapy.com, that you are welcome to share with teachers or parents. I do have one on special time. I have one on roughhousing. I have a whole bunch. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining. Again, if you're listening to the recording, please do feel free to send an email with any questions to KarenWolfeTherapy@gmail.com. And I hope that you will join me for this upcoming class. We have 4 spots out of 6 left, and I'm very excited about it because it really changed my life to do this work. So, and not just the work that I do with kids, actually changed like my life and the ways that I get support now. So thank you so much, everyone. And I hope you have a wonderful day.